The gym smelled of sweat and steel, a place where hearts raced for reasons beyond love, until I saw him. His name was Ethan, though I wouldn't learn that until later, when a single moment would unravel my guarded life. In that crowded, clanging room, his quiet strength pulled me like gravity. It was a Tuesday evening in Chicago, the kind of biting autumn night that made you question why you'd left a warm apartment. Caleb Andrews, was 27, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking and a habit of hiding behind routine. The gym was my escape, a place to drown out the noise of a city that felt too big and a life that felt too small. I'd been single for years, not for lack of trying, but because I'd built walls higher than the skyscrapers outside. Trust didn't come easy. Not after a childhood of whispered judgments in a small Ohio town, where being gay was a sin you didn't name. Ethan was different from the start. He wasn't the loudest in the room, not like the guys flexing from mirrors or shouting over protein shakes. He moved with purpose, his broad shoulders cutting through the chaos with a calm that felt almost defiant. His blonde hair caught the fluorescent light, and his blue eyes, God, those eyes, held a story I wanted to read. I caught myself staring as he adjusted the weights on a barbell, his focus unbroken, his presence magnetic. I wasn't there to flirt. I was there to lift, to sweat, to forget. But when our eyes met across the gym, something shifted. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition, like we'd been circling the same orbit without knowing it. He smiled, a small, hesitant curve of his lips, and I felt my heart stutter. I looked away, pretending to adjust my headphones, but the damage was done. I was hooked. Need a spot. His voice was low, warm, like a fire you want to sit by. He stood beside my bench, wiping sweat from his brow, his tank top clinging to a frame built by discipline. I wasn't even lifting heavy, but I nodded, too caught in the moment to say no. Thanks, I managed, lying back on the bench. His hands hovered above the bar, steady, reassuring. We didn't talk much, just the usual gym banter about reps and form, but every word felt like a thread pulling us closer. When I finished, he extended a hand. Ethan, he said, his grip firm but gentle. Caleb, I replied, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to let go. That night, I left the gym with his number burning a hole in my phone. I told myself it was nothing, just a friendly exchange, but I couldn't stop replaying his smile, his voice, the way he'd looked at me like I was worth seeing. I didn't text him right away. I waited 2 days, agonizing over every word, crafting a message that sounded casual but took me an hour to write. Hey, good meeting you at the gym. Up for grabbing coffee sometime? His reply came in minutes. Thought you'd never ask. Saturday work? My heart did a backflip. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The coffee shop was a cozy hole-in-the-wall in Wicker Park, all exposed brick and mismatched chairs. Ethan arrived in a navy sweater that made his eyes look like the sky after a storm. We talked for hours about his job as a high school history teacher, my late-night design projects, our shared love for old vinyl records, and Chicago's hymn parks. He laughed easily, but there was a guardedness to him, a shadow that flickered when the conversation turned to family or past relationships. I don't talk about home much, he said, stirring his coffee. Small town, smaller minds. Left when I was 18 and never looked back. I nodded, understanding more than I said. Same. Ohio wasn't exactly a pride parade. He chuckled, but his eyes softened. Guess we're both running from something, huh? Maybe we're running towards something, I said, bolder than I felt. His gaze held mine, and for a moment, the world was just us, 2 guys, 2 coffees, and a spark that felt like it could burn down my walls. That first date stretched into dinner, then a walk along the lakefront, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered stars. When he brushed his hand against mine, I didn't pull away. When he kissed me under a street lamp, soft and tentative, I kissed him back. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, fragile but real. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became my orbit. We texted constantly, met for late-night diner runs, and spent Sundays tangled in blankets, watching bad movies. He was patient, funny, and fiercely kind, but there was a tension in him I couldn't place. He changed the subject when I asked about his past, and he never invited me to his apartment. I didn't push, not yet. I was too caught up in the way he made me feel, seen, wanted alive. But love, I'd learned, doesn't bloom without cracks. One night, as we sat on my couch, his phone buzzed relentlessly. He silenced it, but not before I caught a name on the screen, Dad. His jaw tightened, and he stared at the floor like it held answers. Everything okay? I asked, my hand on his. He exhaled, long and heavy. My family, they don't know. About me. About us. I waited, sensing the weight of what he wasn't saying. Ethan's story came in pieces, A conservative upbringing in rural Indiana, a father who preached fire and brimstone, a mother who loved him but feared for his soul. He'd come out to them at 17, and they'd called it a phase, a choice, a mistake. He left for Chicago the day he graduated, building a life where he could breathe. But their calls, their letters, still haunted him, pulling him back to a place he'd fought to escape. "I want you to meet them," he said suddenly, his voice raw. "But I'm terrified they'll hurt you, or that I'll lose you." I squeezed his hand. "You won't lose me. I'm in this." His eyes searched mine, and when he kissed me, it was desperate, like he was anchoring himself to me. I didn't know then how much that promise would be tested, or how one chance meeting at the gym would lead us to a reckoning neither of us could avoid. The air in my apartment felt heavier after Ethan's confession. His family shadow loomed, a silent threat to the fragile world we were building. Yet every morning he'd wake before me, humming softly as he made breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, sometimes just toast with a smear of jam, but always with love. It was in the way he set the table, the way he'd kiss my forehead before handing me a mug of coffee. Those moments felt like armor against whatever was coming. Winter settled over Chicago, blanketing the city in snow and a quiet that mirrored the unspoken tension between us. Ethan was my constant now, my gym partner, my late-night confidant, the man who made me laugh until my sides ached. But his phone kept buzzing with calls he ignored, texts he deleted without reading. I wanted to ask, to push, but I'd learned to read his silences. They weren't about me. They were about a past he couldn't outrun. One Saturday, as we walked through Lincoln Park, snow crunching under our boots, he stopped suddenly. "They want me to come home for Christmas," he said, his breath clouding in the cold. "They keep saying they want to fix things." I shoved my hands deeper into my coat pockets, the wind biting my face. "What do you want?" He looked at me, his blue eyes sharp against the gray sky. "I want you there. I want them to see who I am now, who we are." My heart raced, part fear, part pride. Meeting his family meant stepping into a minefield, but it also meant Ethan trusted me enough to stand beside him. "I'm in," I said, and he pulled me into a hug, his scarf muffling my words. Always. The drive to Indiana was a 6-hour journey through flat, snow-dusted fields. Ethan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw set as we neared his hometown, a speck of a place called Warren, where the biggest landmark was a grain elevator and the only stoplight blinked yellow. I tried to keep things light, joking about the bad country music on the radio, but the closer we got, the quieter he became. His parents' house was a modest 2-story with peeling white paint and a cross above the door. His mother, Ellen, greeted us with a tight smile and a hug that felt more like obligation than warmth. His father, Pastor John, was a towering man with a handshake like a vice and eyes that judged before they saw. The air inside was thick with the smell of pine and unspoken expectations. Dinner was a masterclass in tension. Ellen asked polite questions about my job, my life in Chicago, but her eyes darted to John, gauging his reaction. Ethan sat beside me, his hand brushing mine under the table, silent lifeline. John, though, was a storm waiting to break. He spoke of scripture, of community, of God's plan, each word a subtle jab at the life Ethan had chosen. "So, Caleb," John said, cutting into his roast, "you and Ethan met at the gym?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "Just once, but it stuck." Ethan smiled faintly, but John's expression didn't soften. Interesting place to find companionship. The word hung like a slur. Ethan's hand tightened around mine. "Dad," he said, voice low but firm. "Caleb's not just a friend. He's my partner." The room went still. Ellen's fork clattered against her plate. John's face hardened, and I felt the weight of years of pain in Ethan's grip. "We don't need to discuss this now," John said, but his tone said otherwise. The rest of the meal passed in near silence, broken only by the clink of dishes and Ellen's attempts at small talk. That night, in Ethan's childhood bedroom, we lay on a narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I don't know what I thought." "Don't be," I said, turning to face him. "We're here together. That's what matters." But the next day brought no relief. John cornered Ethan after breakfast, his voice carrying through the thin walls. "You're throwing your life away," he said. "This isn't what God wants for you." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Ethan's voice was steady but raw. "God made me this way, Dad, and he gave me Caleb. If you can't see that, you're the one missing out." I wanted to rush in to stand between them, but this was Ethan's fight. When he emerged, his eyes were red but resolute. "We're leaving," he said, grabbing my hand. "Now." The drive back to Chicago was quiet, but not the heavy kind. It was the silence of two people who'd faced a storm and come out stronger. At a gas station halfway home, Ethan pulled me into a kiss, fierce and unapologetic, under the flickering neon light. "Thank you," he said, "for being my courage." Back in the city, life resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted. Ethan was lighter, like he'd shed a weight he'd carried for years. He started leaving notes on my fridge, little promises in his messy handwriting. You're my home. I'm making pancakes tomorrow. Love you always. I kept every one, tucking them into a drawer like treasures. But the past wasn't done with us. A week before New Year's, Ethan got a letter from his mother. It was short, handwritten, and it broke him. She wrote of love, of regret, but also of hope, that he'd come back to them, to their faith, to a life without me. Ethan didn't cry, but he sat on my couch, staring at the letter like it was a bomb. What do I do with this? He asked, his voice hollow. I sat beside him, my hand on his knee. You don't have to do anything. You're enough, Ethan, just as you are. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes, not just love, but defiance. I want to write back, he said, but I need you with me when I do. That night, we drafted a response together, his words pouring out like a river, finally breaking free. He wrote of his life, his happiness, his love for me. He wrote of a God who didn't hate, who didn't judge, who saw him whole. I held his hand as he sealed the envelope, knowing this was more than a letter. It was a declaration. The letter changed everything. Ethan mailed it with a steady hand, but the waiting was torture. Days turned into weeks with no reply, and I watched him check his phone with a mix of hope and dread. He didn't say it, but I knew he was bracing for rejection, for the final cut of a family tie he'd clung to despite the pain. I did what I could, cooked him dinner, dragged him to comedy shows, held him when the silence got too loud. But some battles you can only fight from the sidelines. Spring arrived in Chicago, painting the city in soft greens and pinks. Ethan and I found a new rhythm, one built on small, steady moments. Morning runs along the lake, lazy evenings sketching while he graded papers, stolen kisses in grocery store aisles. He started opening up more, sharing stories of his childhood, bonfires with friends, sneaking into the local theater, the ache of hiding who he was. I share my own, nights spent drawing to escape my parents' fights, the thrill of moving to a city where I could finally breathe. We were stitching our past together, building something new. But the past has a way of clawing back. One evening, as we sat in a diner sharing a plate of fries, Ethan's phone lit up with an unknown number. He answered, his face shifting from curiosity to shock. It was his mother. She wanted to meet, not in Indiana, but in Chicago. Neutral ground. My stomach nodded, but Ethan's voice was calm. Okay, he said. Next weekend. The days leading up to Ellen's visit were a blur of nerves. Ethan cleaned his apartment, finally inviting me over, a small victory with a frenzy I'd never seen. What if she hates me? He asked, scrubbing a countertop that was already spotless. She won't, I said, though I wasn't sure. And if she does, it's her loss. When Ellen arrived, she looked smaller than I remembered, her graying hair pulled back, her eyes cautious but not unkind. We met at a cafe near Millennium Park, the spring breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. She hugged Ethan, a real hug this time, and nodded at me with a smile that felt like a truce. Over coffee, she spoke carefully, choosing her words like they might break. I read your letter, she said to Ethan. It made me think about a lot of things. Ethan's hand found mine under the table. Like what? She hesitated, stirring her coffee. I was wrong. About you. About God. I've been praying, Ethan, and I think love is bigger than what I was taught. I felt Ethan's grip tighten, his breath catching. Does Dad feel the same? Ellen's face fell. Your father, he's struggling. But I'm here. I want to know you, both of you. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. We spent the day walking through the park, talking about small things. Ethan's teaching, my latest design project, Ellen's garden back home. She asked questions, listened, laughed. For the first time, I saw Ethan relax in her presence, like a kid who'd been holding his breath for years. When she left, she hugged us both, promising to visit again. That night, Ethan was quiet, but it was a good quiet. He pulled me close on the couch, his head resting on my chest. I didn't think this was possible, he whispered. Not with her. Love does that, I said. It surprises you. Summer came, and with it, a new chapter. Ethan moved into my apartment, his books mingling with mine, his clothes filling half the closet. We painted the walls a soft blue, hung photos from our lakefront walks, made the space ours. Every morning, he'd wake early, flipping pancakes or scrambling eggs, humming some off-key tune. I'd tease him about his cooking, but I loved it. The routine, the care, the way he made a home out of us. But life isn't a straight line. In July, Ethan got a call from his sister, Claire, who he hadn't spoken to in years. Their father was sick, lung cancer caught late. Claire wanted Ethan home, not for a visit, but to stay. He's asking for you, she said, her voice breaking over the phone. He doesn't have long. Ethan's face was a mask of conflict. I don't know if I can, he said after hanging up. After everything, how do I face him? I took his hands, feeling the tremble in them. You don't owe him anything. But if you go, it's for you, not him. And I'll be there. He nodded, but the decision weighed on him. We spent days talking it through, weighing the pain of his past against the chance for closure. Ethan was torn between the boy who'd been rejected and the man who'd built a life on his own terms. I couldn't make the choice for him, but I could stand by him, no matter what. In the end, he decided to go. We packed a bag, rented a car, and headed back to Warren, the road stretching out like a question mark. The town hadn't changed. Same grain elevator, same blinking stoplight. But Ethan had. He walked into his parents' house with his head high, my hand in his, unafraid. John was frail, a shadow of the man who'd loomed over our last visit. He lay in a hospital bed set up in the living room, oxygen tubes snaking across his chest. Ellen and Claire were there, their faces etched with grief. When John saw Ethan, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name, regret, maybe, or something softer. Ethan, he rasped, reaching out a trembling hand. I'm sorry. Ethan froze, his breath hitching. I squeezed his hand, grounding him. I'm here, Dad, he said finally, his voice steady but thick with emotion. They talked for hours about the past, about pain, about forgiveness. John didn't have all the answers, but he had remorse, and for Ethan, that was enough. When we left, Ethan cried in the car, not out of sadness but release. I didn't think I needed that, he said, but I did. Back in Chicago, Ethan was different, lighter, freer. He started talking about the future, about us, about a life we could build together. One morning, as he set a plate of waffles in front of me, he slid a small box across the table. Inside was a simple silver ring. Caleb, he said, his voice shaking. Marry me. The ring glinted under the kitchen light, a small circle carrying the weight of 1,000 promises. I stared at it, then at Ethan, his blue eyes nervous but steady, waiting for my answer. My heart was a drumbeat, loud and unsteady, but the word came easily, yes. He laughed, a sound of pure relief, and pulled me into a kiss that tasted of coffee and forever. We stayed like that, tangled in each other, the waffles forgotten on the table. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a vow to face whatever came next together. But even in that moment, I knew love like ours, hard-won and defiant, would always carry a shadow of struggle. Planning a wedding in Chicago felt like a dream stitched together with reality's sharp edges. We wanted something small, intimate, a ceremony in a garden, surrounded by friends who'd become our chosen family. But the world wasn't always kind to two men in love. The florist we first approached raised an eyebrow, his smile thinning when we mentioned 2 grooms. The bakery we loved for its red velvet cake suddenly had scheduling issues when we explained the wedding. Each rejection stung, a reminder that not everyone saw our love as equal. Ethan, though, was unshaken. Screw them, he said, tossing a vendor's card in the trash. We'll find people who get it. And we did, a queer-owned flower shop in Andersonville, a baker who cried when we told her our story, a photographer who specialized in capturing love in all its forms. Every step felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of space in a world that sometimes pushed us to the margins. But the real challenge wasn't the wedding plans, it was family. Ethan's mother was supportive, calling weekly to offer ideas or just to talk. She'd even started attending a new church, one that welcomed everyone, and her pride in Ethan was a quiet miracle. His father, though, was another story. John's health was declining, and while he'd apologized, he hadn't fully embraced us. Ethan wanted him at the wedding, but the invitation felt like a gamble. We don't need his approval, I said one night, as we lay in bed, the city humming outside. But I know you want him there. Ethan sighed, his head on my chest. I want him to see me happy, to see us. Maybe it'll change something. We sent the invitation, a simple card with a photo of us laughing by the lake. Days later, Claire called. Dad wants to come, she said. He's weak, but he's determined. Mom, and I will bring him. The news hit Ethan hard. He didn't cry, but he held me tighter that night, like he was anchoring himself against the storm. I understood. Love and forgiveness are messy, tangled things, and Ethan was navigating both. As the wedding approached, our apartment became a chaos of checklists and late-night talks. Ethan was a whirlwind, obsessing over details like table settings while I focused on the vows. I wanted mine to be perfect, to capture what he meant to me. The man who'd crashed into my life at a gym, who taught me to trust, who made breakfast with love every morning. I wrote and rewrote, scribbling drafts on napkins and sketchbooks on my phone. Nothing felt big enough. The night before the wedding, we sat on our balcony, sharing a bottle of wine. The city sparkled below, alive and restless. Ethan leaned against me, his warmth steadying my nerves. "You scared?" he asked. Terrified, I admitted, "But not about you. Never about you." He smiled, kissing my temple. "Good, because I'm all in, Caleb." The wedding day dawned bright. The September sun warm against the garden we'd chosen in Lincoln Park. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and wildflowers spilled over every surface, vibrant and free. Our friends filled the chairs, their laughter a shield against the world. Ethan looked like a dream in his navy suit, his blonde hair catching the light, his smile brighter than the sun. John arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by Ellen, with Claire at his side. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear, fixed on Ethan with something like pride. When Ethan saw him, he froze, then walked over, kneeling beside the chair. "You came," he said, voice thick. "Couldn't miss my son's wedding," John replied, his voice weak but warm. The ceremony was a blur of joy. We stood under an arch of roses, hands clasped, vows spilling out like poetry. I told Ethan he was my courage, my home, my everything. He promised to love me through every storm, to make me breakfast forever. When we kissed, the crowd cheered, and I felt the world shift, a little fairer, a little brighter. The reception was alive with music and dancing, our friends pulling us onto the dance floor, wine flowing, laughter echoing. John watched from his chair, a small smile on his face. Later, he called Ethan over, and I watched from a distance as they talked, heads bent close. When Ethan returned, his eyes were wet but shining. "He said he's proud of me," Ethan whispered. "He said he sees it now, our love." I pulled him close, the music fading into the background. "He's right to be proud. You're incredible." That night, as we lay in our hotel room, the city quiet outside, Ethan traced circles on my hand. "I didn't think we'd get here," he said. "Not like this." "Me neither," I admitted. "But I'd do it all again. Every fight, every fear, just to end up here with you." He kissed me, slow and deep, and I knew this was only the beginning. Love like ours wasn't just a moment. It was a journey, one we'd walk together, hand in hand, through whatever came next. The first morning after the wedding, Ethan woke early, as always. I found him in the kitchen of our new apartment, flipping pancakes, the smell of butter and syrup filling the air. He wore my old college sweatshirt, too big on him, and a smile that made my heart ache with gratitude. "Morning, husband," he said, sliding a plate toward me. The word, husband, felt like a gift, one I'd never tire of unwrapping. Life as a married couple settled into a rhythm that was both new and familiar. We navigated the small stuff, whose turn it was to do dishes, how to merge our vinyl collections, and the big stuff like dreams of a house with a garden, maybe a dog. Ethan's teaching job kept him busy, his students adoring his passion for history, while my design work took off, landing me a contract with a local nonprofit. Our days were full, but our mornings were sacred. Ethan at the stove, me stealing bites of bacon, our laughter a quiet rebellion against a world that hadn't always rooted for us. John's health declined steadily that fall. Ethan visited Warren often, sometimes with me, sometimes alone. Each trip was a step toward healing, not just for him, but for his family. Ellen became a regular in our lives, sending care packages of homemade jam and calling to check in. Claire, too, grew closer, visiting Chicago to meet our friends and tease Ethan about his terrible dance moves at the wedding. John's presence, though frail, was a bridge rebuilt, fragile but standing. One crisp October morning, Ethan got the call we'd been dreading. John was gone. We drove to Warren that day, the silence in the car heavy but not suffocating. At the funeral, Ethan spoke, his voice steady as he shared memories of his father. Not the pastor who judged him, but the man who'd taught him to fish, to love stories, to keep going. He held my hand through the service, his grip a lifeline, and I knew this loss was different. It wasn't just grief, it was closure. Back in Chicago, Ethan channeled his energy into living fully. He started a GSA at his school, a safe space for queer kids to be themselves, something he'd needed growing up. I watched him light up, telling me about a shy freshman who'd come out to him, or a debate club kid who'd written an essay about love and acceptance. "This is why I teach," he'd say, and I'd fall in love with him all over again. Our first anniversary came faster than I expected. We celebrated quietly, just us, in the garden where we'd married. Ethan brought a picnic, sandwiches, wine, and of course pancakes, kept warm in a thermos. We sat under the same rose arch, now bare in the autumn chill, and talked about the year behind us, the years ahead. "I want to grow old with you," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Gray hair, bad knees, the whole deal." I laughed, kissing him. "You'll still make me breakfast, right?" Every damn day, he promised. That winter, we started planning for the future in earnest. We found a small house in Evanston, with a yard big enough for a garden and a mutt we named Scout. Moving in was chaos. Boxes everywhere, paint cans littering the floor. But it was ours. Ethan hung our wedding photos on the wall, a reminder of the journey that brought us here. Every morning, he'd wake early, slipping into the kitchen to make breakfast, his humming filling the house like a heartbeat. One evening, as snow fell outside, Ethan pulled me into the living room, a record spinning on the turntable. "Dance with me," he said, his eyes bright. I protested. I'm a terrible dancer, but he didn't care. We swayed to some old jazz tune, our dog circling our feet, the world outside forgotten. In that moment, I saw it all. The gym where we'd met, the fights we'd faced, the love that carried us through. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, built on courage and choice. Looking back, I think about that first glance across the gym, the spark that changed everything. Love isn't just the big moments, the proposals, the vows, the victories. It's the quiet ones, too. The mornings when Ethan burns the toast but kisses me anyway, the nights we fall asleep talking about nothing, the life we've made from a single chance encounter. We didn't just find each other. We chose each other again and again, against every odd. And every morning, when I wake to the sound of him in the kitchen, I know I'd choose him 1,000 times more.